we have a men's retreat we do each March. And I tell some of the new people asking about it, you're going to go get to hang around the sorriest group of men you've ever met in your life. And they ain't that way anymore. And for me, that's a great description of who and what we are and what we're about. Now, I'm an alcoholic. My name is Gary Kincaid. Hi, Gary. And I am really, 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 really grateful for a sobriety date and for a new life. Mine started July 25th of 1994 in Odessa, Texas. One announcement before we began: the weekend after Labor Day, just right down the road, is the Edge of the Woods Conference. One of my favorite conferences. It's small, it's Friday night and all day Saturday. We have a husband and wife, Alcoholic Al-Anon, coming. We have a mother and daughter, Alcoholic Al-Anon, coming. Then we got just one of those really sorry people that's an alcoholic coming from St. Louis. So make your plans for it. It's just right down the road. If you're new here, I was listening before we started. The laughter, the talk, I call that the AA symphony. You know, that was something that was not good. There's a whole lot of difference between the laughter in here and the laughter in the bar. It's just a world of difference. So if you're new here, or if you've been here for a while and you forget it, get in the car with some people. Get 3 or 4 of you together. Just go 30 miles, make another meeting, make a small group somewhere. 4 or 5 new people walk into a group that usually is having 6 or 7 people there. It excites them no end. You might want to take your own donuts or something, but go to conferences. You know, I never had anybody deliver my whiskey for free. If I wanted to get and stay drunk, I had to go out and get it. I had to make plans for it. I had to go do things. And the same thing in this program. It's about action. So I'm going to tell one story that many of you folks have heard before, if you've ever been to church. Well, that'll eliminate about half of it. But it's an old story. Traveling salesman stopped at a farm one day. He was talking to the farmer, and a pig came up on the porch, and the pig had a wooden leg. And after a while, the salesman couldn't stand anymore, and he said, "What's with that pig and the wooden leg?" And he said, "Man, that's the finest animal that ever lived. Some people broke in this house one night and they were getting ready to rob us and maybe kill us, and that pig came in with a stick in his snout and he ran them off." The salesman said, "Yeah, but what about the wooden leg?" He said, "Another night we were all asleep. The house caught on fire. We didn't know it. That pig came in with a bucket of water and put that fire out and saved our lives." The salesman said, "Yeah, what about the wooden leg?" He said, "Man, I've been trying to tell you, that pig's just too good to eat all at once." It's going to be the same way with going through the steps out of this book. You know, they're just too good to do all of them all at once on one night. So y'all know how my scheduling is. I'm really, really hopeful that by the end of next Monday night we will be completed with step 2. So just keep that in mind. Who in here has Big Book with you? Okay, no, phone doesn't count. Stand up and read the first 3 words on page 112. This is all I want y'all to get this weekend. First 3 words on 112.
Read this book.
There you go. Who else has a book? Read the first 3 words on page 32. Stand up and yell it.
More than once.
Whatever I have to share with you is my experience with you people over these years, but this book is the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. We're participating right now in the fellowship, and hopefully the more of us that read this book more than once and continue to read it will have home groups where the program and the fellowship are always married. And when that's happening, the only natural outlet for that is service work, is getting out to spread what has saved our lives to all of those other people that need their lives saved from the same thing. So read the book. If you're new here, get in the book. We're going to get to step 1 tonight, but first we're going to talk about the best friend that Alcoholics Anonymous has prior to AA. Anybody know who that friend is?
John Barleycorn.
Alcohol. It's the best friend we have in Alcoholics Anonymous. I love seeing the members of the Al-Anon family group here. Y'all have a phrase, I believe, that says you didn't cause it, you can't cure it. What's the other one? You can't control it. You never could. It's been my experience, the only thing that finally gets an alcoholic to the point of surrender, if you're like I am, it was not my mother, it was not any of my wives, and that's not funny in here. It's not unusual, just don't think that. My children, they couldn't get me in here. It took alcohol finally. And those of you that are relatively new, and some of the rest of us make this mistake fairly often, we tend to talk about the final days of our alcoholism. And when I'm doing that when I got here, and I'm talking about the final days, I'm talking about all the consequences that occurred. Those consequences can be arrests and divorces and health consequences and CPS and financial consequences. You know, we all come in here with a boatload of trouble. That's not alcoholism. Some of you have heard me share before, when I got brought in this time, the IRS put me on their amends list. I was going through another divorce. My children are twins, boy and a girl. They were 19 at that time. Totally disenfranchised is what I used to say. The reality is I had abandoned those children. We have to look at some of the words we use. We had a newcomer with us this weekend. A bunch of us made a trip up to Oklahoma City and then came back down to Palestine yesterday. And I asked this guy how long he had been homeless. He said, "I'm not homeless." I said, "Yeah, you are. Where do you live?" "Well, I'm living with my mom and dad." I said, "You're homeless." So disenfranchised may be the pretty way to say I abandoned my children. The only vehicle I had, the transmission's going to go out of it right away, and I'm having to ask people for rides to meetings. Really embarrassed me. I couldn't have walked around this building without bumping into my liver. I've got consequences on my mind. But I had something happen that I hope to God each of you has had. And it didn't last very long, but it was powerful. And I believe it wasn't the first time it ever happened. It's just the first time I ever paid attention to it. Y'all call it a moment of clarity. I thought I was going insane. But I had a real short moment on Sunday evening, the 24th of July, and it was short, it was 2 or 3 minutes. And it's like I heard a voice, not out loud. I've heard those before. That's called DTs. If you're new in here, we're really reluctant to listen too much when you're telling us that God told you something that the rest of us didn't get to hear. Bill writes about that quite a bit, by the way. I was told early on, me speaking to God is called prayer. God speaking to me is called schizophrenia. But I had just a moment driving back home drunk, and I heard or felt that voice saying, "You're not safe." And I don't know if I've ever known any more fear than in that moment. I was suddenly just terrified. And for that short moment, 2 things happened. And each of you has had experiences similar to this. One of those things was I got to see me all of a sudden for who and what I really was. That lifetime I had spent trying to convince other people around me, I'm okay, I'm fine, I'm a good dad, smart, I'm smart man, I'd be a catch for any employer. I'm considerate of other, all that stuff that we say. I had just a moment where I saw me as the sorry SOB I was and had been for a long, long time. And the other thing I knew in that moment was that I can't not drink. And I knew something was going to have to happen. And I knew it was going to have to be, and this was not like oh, thank you God, there's AA. I've been waiting to get there my whole life. It was almost like, I'm going to have to call that guy. I knew a man in Odessa that was one of those men that if you were around him for 10 minutes, you knew he was sober in AA. He never did hide that. And I knew I was going to have to go to Joe's office and to talk to him. Now, I mentioned that moment of clarity because I do not believe for 1 second that God only has one moment of grace for any of us. I believe I'd been having moments like that since before I started drinking. And we'll get into that on step 1. I don't believe there's a time, at least the God you've introduced me to says, I'm going to give up on them. I'm giving them every shot I've ever given. I'm ever going to give them. That just happened to be the one where everything kind of merged and I got to see me for who and what I was, and I knew the gig was up, that I can't not drink. Of course, I did what any of you would do. I had a half a bottle of whiskey between my legs when I had that moment. Pulled off the road, the lights weren't on, the old truck. gathered myself, turned the lights on, and went home and sat in that filthy recliner in my house. Drank the rest of the whiskey. Waited for the day to break to go talk to a man. And this thing got started. What I want to share, though, is it would not have ever gotten started without alcohol having done its work on me. So I got to a point in my life where I could just barely some days allow y'all to do your work on me. And I keep that in mind a great deal today when I'm working with new people. That's evolved over the years. Read this book more than once, and you'll find good evidence, good experience, and good instructions for what to do to work with a new person. I've tried to get people not to drink. If they're not going to get it from their children and their mother and the judge, what in the hell makes me think they're going to get it from me? So I want to talk to them about my experience of alcohol finally getting me to a point where I realized I can't not drink. And I hope to God, if you're an alcoholic in this room tonight, you've had that experience. And I hope to God you understand that having had that experience, it won't last unless immediately followed up by a simple series of repeated actions. Actions that you may not hear about in some meetings. But if you read this book more than once, you're eventually going to hear about them. So please get into the book. So I want to get away from those final days where we all had those consequences of some sort. There is a line in the 11th chapter that says, "There's no one who won't be considered or who has sunk too low not to be welcomed cordially." If, it's one reason you want to read the book, there are caveats on everything. If they mean business. And again, the only thing I've ever experienced that could make me mean business was alcohol. So forget the last days of all the consequences. I hope you get a sponsor like I did. He was not interested in my consequences. What I experienced is every snowball that was already rolling downhill on the day I got here, it's going to keep on rolling. It's not going to stop just because I came in and picked up a check. Those consequences will all have to be lived out, and the faster, with the help of a sponsor, I get in this book and write down what those things are and look at them and find out my defects of character which caused them to happen. It's the damnedest thing in that book, newcomers. It never does say alcohol caused them to happen. And then go set about the process of trying to set them right. The quicker those consequences will begin to heal. But if I just come in here like I had done in 1988, when I was in a little bit of trouble, anybody ever been in trouble? And I don't get anybody to second it today, but most of my life, if I've not been the smartest man in the room, me and him are right there together. And I'd have me some troubles, and I'd think out a way to handle those problems. And I thought I'd skated on a lot of them. And I get in here and I get hold of a guy and said, "I don't give a damn about your marriage. or the IRS. I'm not a marriage counselor. I'm not an accountant. If you've come in here to get your marriage back, hit the door. If you've come in here to get a good job, hit the door. This is a big one. If you come in here to get your kids back, hit the door. Now that sounds hard, doesn't it? The sad news is many of us can walk in having had that awakening to, I can't not drink. And too often people sit down with us and start trying to help out our marriage or our finances or our parenting, and we just slide on by that moment of terror we had about alcohol. And that urgency goes away, and we start doing very often in AA what I did before AA, and that's trying to fix the consequences and never identifying the problem that spews them out. So tonight, before we get into step one, I want to ask you to go back to your beginning. And that, as Bill talks about it often in his other writings, the beginning of your relationship with alcohol. All of us got introduced at some time or another. I have to make my apologies very quickly. I'm sorry, this is just the way it was. I was 19 before I had my first drink. I know that's late. We're supposed to start when we're 12 or something. I didn't do it. I was 19. And I'm not talking about the first time your daddy asked you to get a beer and you blew the foam off and took a drag on the beer. I'm talking about going back when you had that real introduction to alcohol. And you got enough of it, so y'all began that romance. And make no doubt about it, that's what it was. It was a relationship. In the beginning, Bill writes about it here in the book in several different ways. Another reason to read the book. And the book's in context. He doesn't write this and that means something, and we go to the next thing and that means something. Got to read it in context. But many of you may have had that introduction the same way Bill and I did. Very first of his story. Page 1. First paragraph. I forgot the strong warnings and prejudice of my people concerning drink. Now, I'm one of those people. I got a lot of warnings from the people in my life, like my mother and my grandmothers mainly, because my dad's an alcoholic, my grandfather's an alcoholic. I mean, it's all through the family. And I got strong warnings. Don't drink. It'll ruin your life. Anybody else have those warnings? And if you stay in AA, you're going to hear other people that they had their first drunk with their mother. And they didn't get those strong warnings. But he starts off with that. We all got an introduction. He gives us another one on page 151. Now think about this for a moment, going back to your beginning. For most normal folks, I don't include the members of the Al-Anon family group in that. I believe Bill's saying for most normal drinkers. Drinking, now ask yourself, if this was ever you, means conviviality. And if you don't know what that word means while you're reading the book, get a damn dictionary. I need to know the meaning of these words because it's going to save my life, and hopefully not just so my life will get saved, but because then I can share with others what's happened to me. Conviviality means we all got together and had fun. little laughter. Drinking means conviviality, companionship, and colorful imagination. It means release from care, boredom, and worry. Joyous intimacy with friends and a feeling that life is good. Now look at your experience with building a relationship with alcohol. Was any of that true for you? Alcohol is a big seller in the world. Did y'all know that? Lots of people drink. My brother and I were sober together at one time between divorces. I don't know why people think that's so funny. But it is. And it was good for me. My brother had a job and a house and some money. And he wanted to go out. And that meant he might pay. And we'd go to a club. We went to that, I think it was called the Brewery in Odessa. And Herman would walk in and he'd find a table, and I remember him saying to me, "Let's get a drink. I've got to have a drink before I can go talk to somebody and ask them to dance." So for my brother, conviviality, companionship, colorful imagination. And he always embarrassed the hell out of me. He got a Cuba Libre. That's rum and Coke with the lime wedge, and and he wanted his glass done right. And he would start drinking on that, and he'd have a little, "Okay, I'm ready," and he'd get up and go ask somebody to dance. And that son of a gun might order a second one, but never a third. That was not my introduction to alcohol. And probably not yours either. The younger we were when we got the introduction, probably the more we drank, because we had to get as much of it down as we could, as quick as we could, because it's kind of hard to take what was left over and put it in the refrigerator at home. As if there would be some left over. But all of you had a beginning. And most of us, we're going to start moving into step one now. Most of us had an experience. I say for me, it was the first real spiritual awakening I ever had in my life. Now, I didn't say I found the elixir of life. I didn't say any of that stuff. I experienced liking this stuff. That's what I said. And I lied to me, and you may have lied to yourself, starting the first night out. What I said was, I like this stuff. I didn't like that stuff. I love that feeling. I love that feeling. Now, where are we going to hear that again in the book? In the doctor's opinion. Now, let me read this, and then I'll go read that, and you'll start deciding if you're in the right room or not. For most normal folks, drinking means conviviality, companionship, and colorful imagination. The doctor writes, men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. He never does mention conviviality. And I'm asking each of you to take a look at what that effect was in the beginning. And I've heard enough of your stories to know some of you had things going on that were so traumatic, it allowed you almost immediately to forget all that stuff, blot it all out. For others, you could dream dreams. I've heard it said, and you've gone to speaker meetings, I've heard 1,000 speakers say, as a kid, I always felt different. But I'll bet you that I could ask the same thing of the members of the Al-Anon family group, or anybody. Every kid is goofy. I think every kid probably feels different at some time or another. But when I got enough to drink that night, and I bet the first time out, when you got enough the first time, alcohol did not do anything to me that came as close to being as powerful as what it did for me. Now, I'm at Texas A&M when I'm doing this, and I'm not the only Aggie there getting drunk that night. My roommate, Bill, the guy that's going to be my first best man, another Bill, a guy in our outfit that had the only car. I'm so damn old, I went to college when freshmen could not have cars on campus. George, they got as drunk as I did. And to my recall, 2 of them got really sick. And Bill, my roommate, had a hell of a hangover. Every time we went out and got drunk, he had a hangover. So I'm not the only person, you're not the only person with the people you started with that got drunk. I have found out later, because I've got to talk to 2 of those people and talk about it. And I asked them, what did alcohol do for you back then? And they looked at me like I had a third eye. I'm going out drinking just to raise hell and be with you guys, and that's just what we did. George became an engineer. Bill became an engineer. The other Bill became a lifetimer in the military. I've stayed up with them throughout the years. One of the Bills and George have both told me when college was over and they got married, they can't ever remember having gotten drunk again. And Bill was saying, you know, the guy that was my best man, he said, I can't remember the last time I drank anything. College was over. Life was here. It was time to get out there and start doing things. Was that your experience? And I could go on with other readings here. And I already see the time, and I can't. But one of the first things that I had to get into my mind out of the experience of going through the book and the steps and listening to recovered men and women was that as far as alcohol is concerned, I really am different from my brother. I'm different. And as we move into the first step, what we had from Bill's reading tonight was he's starting to emphasize from the doctor's opinion all the way through to page 21, something that he says explains a lot to us. And that's that physical difference of an alcoholic. And I can talk about it in these terms because Bill used the word brain. That allergy of the body, if you're new here, do you remember how much that excited you when you heard you had an allergy? It's a big deal. You may need to hear it and rehear it and rehear it. Joe and Charlie say the definition of an allergy is an abnormal reaction to a normal substance. My brother has a normal reaction to alcohol. I have an abnormal reaction. I'm 6'1", he's 5'10". I still have my hair. He hadn't had his in 40 years. We come from the same family. How come I've got alcoholism and he doesn't? Any of y'all ever asked those questions? Why? That's just the way it is. Some of you in here have blue eyes, and some have brown, and some have green. That's just the way it is. I'm an alcoholic, and that's just the way it is. I don't believe my brother has spent much of his life going from doctor to doctor and reading books about how he could stretch himself to be 3 inches taller. To my knowledge, he's never done hair plugs or any of that other stuff. He's accepted who and what his reality physically is, and he's got out and got a life going that way. I never could accept that alcohol was a problem. And now I know why. It wasn't. That sounds strange probably to the non-alcoholics. It was a solution. And the solution would be something different for each of us, but in the beginning it really worked. I wanted you to look a little tonight, and I hope you'll take a little of it home with you, to go back in your own perusing your memory to those early years of building this exceedingly intimate relationship that you had with alcohol. And this offends some people. It was the single most intimate relationship I had in my life. Over my children, over my mother, over any of those wives, over good friends. And I love my mother, I love my kids. I loved a couple of those wives. But alcohol was an intimate relationship. And when you walk into a room and you hear someone say, "Boy, we're glad you're here. Now just don't drink and go to meetings," that impacts me kind of negatively. You're asking me to give up the longest intimate relationship I've ever had in my life. Now, people have been asking me to give that up a long time. What I did this time being brought to AA, it's like I finally went to the lawyer's office and said I want a divorce. You don't get a divorce the day you go into the office. There is a waiting period. Anybody here ever gone to the attorney to start the divorce proceedings and ended them before the divorce was final? I've done that with alcohol a number of times. I'm through with you. No more. But there was just something so seductive about that relationship that I changed my mind, Todd. You know, and we'll talk about that a little this week and next. I just thought I'd changed my mind. But you each have a brain. I don't care what anybody's told you. You've got a brain. And what Bill is saying is the physical aspect of alcoholism is in the brain. And the brain is just an organ, like the kidneys or the heart. And there is something different, and we still don't know exactly what it is. We know more. But I can tell you, having come out, I'm a retired psych therapist. I used to be that, and the more I learned, the drunker I got to get back into that after recovery. But we really don't know much more about the impact of alcohol than Dr. Silkworth knew. We believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is the manifestation, look that word up, of an allergy. That the phenomenon of craving, big word, craving, listen to how he writes it, is limited to this class and never occurs in my brother, in either of the Bills, or in George that I went to college with. Now wait a minute, I've seen my brother drunk. He's drunk because he went out to party and he drank. And if somebody had said anything, which happened a number of times, hey, you got a call, you got to go home, and he had had 3 drinks, he'd have gone home. You wouldn't have got that call through to me because I'd made sure home didn't know where I was once I was going to get started. The brain creates the craving, and what it literally means is some of you who in the very beginning believed that you had a tremendous capacity for alcohol, you could drink more than anybody else, any others in here like that? I'd hear women sometimes say, I can drink any man under the table. I always look for those women because that's where I wanted to be, was under the table. What we thought was choice and control was powerlessness. And what the doctor is saying is that once I and you, if you're an alcoholic, once we start to drink the way we want to drink, it's not having a sip of beer and saying, see, I can do that. It's going out to the party on Friday night. You've got a case of a couple of bottles. You're going out, you're having fun. It's about 11 o'clock at night. And you're going to keep on drinking till that's gone and go get some more sometime. You're not doing that because that's what you decided to do. The doctor's saying you're powerless over alcohol once you put it in your body, and cannot guarantee the outcome. That will never, ever, 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 ever change. Nothing in AA is going to change my brain. Medical science has no pill. Now they've got a pretty good one these days that they can give that can block some of that craving for a short period of time. But they can't change the brain. We're not going to rewire the brain. So you will hear, what's an alcoholic? Always an alcoholic. Then why in the hell are there people that accept that and they go drink again? Don't you think somebody'd have to be damn near insane to know and they go drink again? Now, I know most of y'all, we're all people that from the very first meeting on, we've never had another drink. But you know a lot of people that aren't that way. They'd have to be crazy, wouldn't they? See step 2. Crazy for the alcoholic is what we would call in the business an Axis 2 diagnosis, meaning it's not organic. You have a brain, but you also have a mind. They're different. My mind is my beliefs, my attitude, my opinions. What runs most of our minds nearly all of our life? Come on now.
I'm thinking.
No, our feelings. Why'd you do that? I felt like it. You made me feel this way. Well, I don't feel like it. You hurt my feelings. I wouldn't have done that if you hadn't. We've been, feelings and emotion have always overruled intellect. Always. You know what we call that in the psychological field? Adolescent behavior. Seriously. And when you hear some people say, I'm 45 years old and I've got 2 degrees and I've been very successful in life, but emotionally I'm no further along than I was when I was 16. That's what they're talking about. AA is not designed to change my brain. If I'm going to get sober, stay sober, and have a life that is somewhat happy and usefully whole, and we are promised that, then I got to change my mind. That'll get addressed more next week when Bill talks about self-knowledge. That's the answer right before he got drunk again. Fear sobered me for a bit right before he got drunk again. And then he moves over to the problem of the alcoholic lies mainly in their thinking, in their mind. This program is designed to change my mind. I was telling, and I'll end here, I see the time, we gotta do chips. We had a newcomer with us yesterday, and I was talking to his sponsor today. He said, what do you think? And I said, you're gonna have to stay on that boy pretty close, because he's one that's gonna have a lot of new ideas. I mean, you can just hear, you can hear the brain on, the mind almost whirring. I am not, y'all, many of you have heard this, but I say it because it's true. Thinking I can use my mind to fix my mind is like asking my wife's boyfriend to help with the marriage. I'm going to get some ideas, but I'm getting them out of my mind, and that's where the problem is. This program is talking about becoming willing to be changed and having nothing to do with the change. That's why the word is often used, surrender. Surrender what? My outcomes, my opinions, my beliefs, my ought tos, and to realize that I am afflicted, a word Bill uses, with a chronic, we're always going to have it, progressive, it's always going to be getting worse, never better. Fatal. And here's the saving grace of that definition. Illness. Chronic, progressive, fatal illness. Not a chronic, progressive, fatal sin. Not a chronic, progressive, fatal lack of willpower. Illness. Alcoholism is an illness. And unless or until I accepted that I had the illness, I was never going to take the medicine. And next week, we'll get into step 1. Thank you.